Picture this. It's a cold October morning in 1721, and the skies over Madrid hang heavy and grey like lead curtains. Inside the sprawling halls of Buen Retiro Palace, a sharp human scream cuts through the silence. Queen Isabel of Farnese, second wife to King Philip V of Spain, is in labour. But something is very wrong. The pregnancy had been troubled from the start. Doctors whispered warnings behind velvet curtains, and astrologers made vague predictions they quickly retracted. Still, everyone clung to hope. After all, this was royalty. The bloodline had to continue. The dynasty had to endure. But now, with the queen writhing in agony, her sweat-soaked sheets stained scarlet, hope was starting to feel like denial. "Summon Dr. Chervy." "Now," snapped one of the queen's ladies, her voice cracking as another rushes down the marble hall, skirts snapping, footsteps ricocheting off the stone like gunfire. The news spreads through the palace like wildfire. Meanwhile, King Philip, the grandson of France's Sun King, knelt alone in the royal chapel, murmuring half-remembered Latin prayers to a god he no longer believed in. His madness, an inherited affliction passed down like a crown, had only deepened in recent months, and as his wife screamed just a few chambers away, he remained locked in silent reverie. Dr. Giuseppe Cervi arrived breathless and pale. Trained in the finest medical schools of Paris and Padua, he'd seen his share of difficult births, but nothing could have prepared him for this. There are two heads," he whispered, frozen in place. "But they're joined." A silence followed that felt like the air had been sucked from the room. From the shadows, one figure stepped forward, Louisa of Orléans, the Queen's enigmatic cousin. She had watched everything with eerie calm, her violet eyes unreadable. "It's the curse," she murmured, barely audible. "The blood always demands its price." On the bed, Queen Isabel moaned weakly. Two infant girls, fused from sternum to navel, had just entered the world. Conjoined twins, identical faces, one body, and what appeared to be a single beating heart. The doctor, trembling, declared, "They won't survive, and the Queen is losing too much blood." And still, King Philip prayed, lost in the fog of a mind unraveling. Then, as if from some secret part of history long buried, Louisa acted. She pulled from her garments a tiny glass vial filled with golden liquid. "Leave us," she commanded. Her voice, though calm, carried the weight of centuries. And they obeyed. "This elixir," she told the stunned physician, "has been passed through royal veins for generations. It can heal, but it always exacts a cost." She poured 3 drops onto the Queen's bloodless lips, 3 more onto the infants' foreheads. What happened next defied everything Chervy knew about life, medicine, or reality. Queen Isabel's colour returned. The twins let out a soft, almost melodic cry. Against every law of nature, they had survived. But miracles, especially in royal courts, are rarely gifts, they're warnings. And the true price, that would be paid not in blood that day, but in decades to come. 18 years later, the air over Madrid hung thick with July heat, and the royal palace buzzed like a disturbed hive. But the whispers weren't about war or scandal, not this time. They were about 2 girls no one had seen, 2 princesses hidden away since birth. The twin infantas, Maria Teresa and Maria Antonia, daughters of the late Queen Isabel of Farnese, were finally about to be unveiled. The court was electric with rumors. Some swore the girls were hideously deformed. Others claimed their beauty was so otherworldly that revealing them would ignite jealousy in every royal court in Europe. But the truth, as it always is in monarchies, was darker, stranger, and far more dangerous. "Are you certain this is wise?" asked the Marquess of Ensenada, eyes fixed on the ceremonial plans sprawled across the table. "Once they are seen, "The decision is made," interrupted King Ferdinand V's voice clipped and final. "Spain needs alliances, and my sisters are valuable. Valuable, not beloved, not protected, just strategic." Across the palace, in a secluded wing sealed off from the world since their birth, the twins were preparing to meet that world, or what little of it courtly politics would allow. Joined from the chest to the waist, Maria Theresa and Maria Antonia were a singular contradiction. Two minds, two souls, one body. Their faces, identical, ethereal, mirrored the serene beauty of Habsburg portraits from centuries past. But behind the symmetry lived two completely different spirits. Teresa was sharp, commanding, with a voice that cut through the air like a blade. Antonia was softer, quieter, her eyes always distant, as if listening to things no one else could hear. "They'll parade us like beasts at a carnival," Teresa hissed, as maids tightened the bodice of their custom-made gown. A miracle of tailoring designed to conceal what nature had not. "Or maybe," Antonia whispered, "it's a chance to be more than ghosts." Louisa of Orléans entered just then, now older, her raven hair streaked with white, but her presence undiminished. The maids scattered like frightened birds. "You look magnificent," she said, inspecting the twins like a general before battle. "No one will resist your singularity." "You mean monstrosity," Teresa snapped. Louisa stepped forward, took their faces in her hands, and said softly, "You carry the most powerful blood in Europe. Your condition is not a curse, it is a sign." "A sign of what?" Antonia asked, her voice barely audible. "Of what it costs to keep empires alive," Louisa said. "Centuries of cousins marrying cousins, of keeping the bloodline pure, of bending nature to the will of kings. The deformities, the madness, the barren wombs. They were all warnings. But no one listened. In the throne room, the ambassadors of France, England, Austria, and Portugal waited with calculated smiles and sharpened eyes. Royal marriages were weapons. Daughters were currency, and today Spain was about to put its strangest coin on the table. Trumpets blared, doors opened, and into the hall walked two girls who moved as one, a living contradiction dressed in silver and blue. The gown shimmered under candlelight, masterfully hiding the truth, but not erasing it, not completely, a hesitation in their steps, a synchronicity too perfect. Some noticed, most didn't, but all felt something shift. "My dear sisters," the king said, taking one hand from each, "your presence honors the court." The French ambassador stepped forward, kissed their hands, and said in flawless Spanish, "Your beauty precedes you." Teresa smiled with surgical precision. A miracle, considering our existence was a secret until today. Across the room, Louisa of Orléans watched it all unfold. This wasn't a debut, it was a revelation, and it was only the beginning. The music in the throne room had softened to a ceremonial hum, but behind every bow and curtsy lurked something colder. Calculation. The foreign dignitaries had come to witness history, but what they found instead was mythology made flesh. The twin infantas, Maria Theresa and Maria Antonia, stood beside their brother, the king, a vision equal parts grace and impossibility. They moved in synchrony so seamless it felt rehearsed, too rehearsed, as if they had not been raised but choreographed. And the ambassadors noticed. "Witches," whispered the Portuguese envoy to his French counterpart. "They say the girls can read minds." "Nonsense," the Frenchman replied with a dismissive smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But let's not pretend they were hidden away for nothing." The Austrian ambassador said nothing at all, he simply stared. He was no stranger to strange. His empress, Maria Theresa, ruled a fractured empire held together by willpower and family bloodlines that traced back to centuries of genetic rot. He had been told to observe closely, not just for marriage potential, but for signs. Signs of what happens when royal blood turns against nature. And now he was looking at two perfect faces on one impossible body. One girl with two minds. Or was it two girls in one prison? They're terrified, Teresa whispered through a frozen smile as courtiers applauded. No, Antonia murmured, sensing something deeper. They're recognizing us. Recognition, that was the right word, because every noble in that hall, every prince, every bishop, every ambassador, carried a version of the same secret, the same blood, the same decay masked in jewels and incense. And now, here it was, personified in these two impossible daughters of Spain. As the crowd swayed to the music of the pavane, Louisa of Orléans stood at the edge of it all, smiling faintly. She had orchestrated this moment for nearly 2 decades, raised the girls in silence, taught them to speak and walk and think like rulers, like weapons. They weren't hidden because they were shameful. They were hidden because they were powerful. And now they would be seen. Far below the palace, in a room no one had entered for years, Dr. Giuseppe Cervi, now an old man, stooped and grey, sat alone by candlelight. His hands shook as he opened the final page of his private journal, a volume he'd begun the night the twins were born. "The blood always demands its price," he wrote in Latin, "and the price is never merely physical." On the table before him lay the same vial Louisa had used all those years ago, the golden elixir that had pulled 2 infants from the jaws of death. And maybe something worse, he sealed the journal with wax, pressing into it the intertwined sigils of Bourbon and Habsburg. Power preserved by pain, lineage maintained by silence. And above, in the flickering glow of the throne room, the twins danced, a spectacle, a prophecy, a warning. And somewhere inside that single, impossibly alive body, a plan was forming. Spring, 1750, the air over Madrid pulsed with the urgency of politics, masquerading as pageantry. Bells rang across the city in celebration or warning as news broke. The twin infantas of Spain were to marry the Portuguese heir, Prince José Francisco, an alliance forged not in love, but in necessity. In the palaces of London, Paris, and Vienna, diplomats scrambled to decode the implications. 2 girls, 1 body, 1 marriage. It defied canon law, biology, and diplomacy. And yet it was happening. Inside the royal apartments, Maria Teresa and Maria Antonia stood motionless as seamstresses pinned and repinned their wedding gown, a miracle of silk and structural engineering designed to dignify what the world still whispered as deformity. "Do you think he's ready?" Antonia asked, voice low, eyes soft with doubt. Teresa didn't even blink. "They've been preparing him like a lamb for slaughter. They showed him drawings, medical reports, brought in every scholar short of a necromancer. But understanding and accepting," Antonia murmured, "aren't the same thing." "He has no choice," Teresa snapped. "We have the gold, they need it. He'll love us or pretend to." The door opened. Louisa of Orléans entered with the silence of a shadow. Time had silvered her hair, but sharpened her presence. In her hand, she held a wrapped parcel. Her smile was that of someone unveiling a weapon. "This," she said, unwrapping the cloth, "is the truth." It was a miniature portrait, an image of a young woman with their exact face, but alone, whole, not conjoined. Antonia stared. "Is that?" "Your mother," Louisa answered. Teresa narrowed her eyes. "You said Queen Isabel bore us." Louisa looked them both in the eyes. "I lied. Maria Luisa Gabriela of Savoy, the first wife of King Philip III, long believed dead in 1714. But according to Louisa, she hadn't truly died. Not entirely. Her body, Louisa claimed, had been preserved through an ancient alchemical rite known only to a few, a technique born in Arabic medicine and passed in whispers through European courts. The elixir, the same one used the day the twins were born. Your father couldn't bear her death, Louisa said. He had her suspended, kept in stasis beneath the palace. And when she woke, Antonia asked, her voice trembling, one final night, one final child. But the process had changed her, Louisa said. Her body, her blood. And when the time came, she couldn't deliver you. Isabel of Farnese agreed to take her place, for the crown, for the illusion. The room fell silent. Everything, their isolation, their secrecy, their very existence, now made sense in the most senseless of ways. Why now? Teresa asked finally. Why tell us this? Louisa's voice softened. Because you are about to become queens, and queens must know the price of power. The maids finished adjusting the gown and left. Louisa stepped forward and added one last truth, one neither twin could ignore. You will conceive, she said. You must, and your children will not be ordinary. Outside, the sound of a carriage approaching echoed through the gardens. The groom had arrived, and everything was about to change. He arrived with all the expected grandeur, velvet banners, gold-plated coaches, an escort of mounted guards gleaming in the Castilian sun. But behind the ceremony, the trumpets, and the endless layers of diplomacy, Prince José Francisco of Portugal wasn't what anyone expected. 25, tall, hawk-eyed, carrying the famously cursed jaw of the Braganzas, but not disfigured by it. His appearance was tolerable, even striking under the right light. But it was his gaze that made the room go still, intense, alert, like a man who didn't just see faces, but thoughts. His Highness has shown curiosity, the Portuguese ambassador had warned. We've prepared him. Prepared. That was the word everyone kept using, as if marriage to two minds in one body were a matter of briefing papers and diagrams. On the eve of the ceremony, a tightly controlled audience was arranged, the first time groom and brides would meet. When the doors opened, he didn't flinch, didn't stare. He studied, his eyes flicked from Teresa's steady poise to Antonia's watchful softness, then back again. He smiled, not out of politeness, out of recognition. You're more extraordinary than anyone told me, he said, bowing. It's an honor beyond words. Teresa offered a precise nod. The honor is mutual. Antonia added, we hope this union brings peace to both our nations. It will bring much more, José Francisco replied. I feel it. And the strange thing was, he meant it. That night, as the court dined in gilded halls and danced beneath crystal chandeliers, the twins sat quietly in their chambers, the echoes of that brief encounter still vibrating in their shared ribcage. He wasn't afraid, Antonia whispered. No, Teresa said. He knew. Knew what? Teresa didn't answer. She didn't need to. Later that same night, Dr. Chervy arrived one final time, older than anyone remembered, his spine bent from years of secrets. He brought a carved wooden box to the twins' private quarters. Inside, he said, you'll find my life's work, every note, every observation, every theory about what you are and what you could become. And nestled between those pages, a second vial, identical to the one Louisa used the day they were born. One dose, he said, in case of a birth gone wrong, or a death not meant to last. They asked him why now. He looked at them with fading eyes, voice thin and raw. Because I won't be here tomorrow, and because the blood that made you may one day try to unmake you. Before he left, he made one final request. Remember your humanity, he said. You are the product of power, yes, but you are still human. And power always lies. That night, as the court toasted to alliances and futures, Dr. Shervy slipped away in his sleep. His death was not announced until after the wedding. Louisa had his chamber sealed within the hour. "Rest well, old friend," she murmured. "Your part is done." Theirs had just begun. The sun rose over Madrid like it knew what the day meant. Church bells rang across the city as if announcing salvation, or perhaps warning of a sacrament that had no precedent in the history of Christendom. Inside the cathedral, royalty from every corner of Europe filled the pews, their eyes trained on the altar, not to witness love, but something far more important: the unification of two empires, one womb, and centuries of bloodlines too tangled to unravel. The wedding of Prince José Francisco of Portugal to the conjoined twin infantas of Spain was more than a spectacle. It was a gamble with God. The twins approached the altar draped in white and silver, an illusion of symmetry designed to make the impossible look divine. The silk masked their shared anatomy, but no tailoring could hide the truth from those who already knew. Some looked away, most stared. José Francisco stood waiting, calm, composed, but beneath that calm something vibrated, not nerves. Recognition. He could feel their pulse the moment they entered the cathedral. They could feel his. The vows were spoken as one, rings were exchanged, and when the priest declared them husband and wives, plural and singular, he did so with a pause that would be debated by theologians for decades. But it was the moment after, the moment the doors of the sacristy closed behind them, that would change everything. In a palace chamber, draped with velvet and incense, the couple stood alone. Or as alone as three minds in one bed could ever be. "You're not what they told me," José Francisco said, his voice a whisper in the candlelight. "And you are," Teresa replied, watching him with the same calculation she gave to diplomats. He nodded. "They taught me your anatomy, trained me for the mechanics, but they never told me you'd be complete." "Complete," Antonia echoed. "You feel things before they happen," he said, stepping closer. "You speak in unison, but think in opposition. Your minds intertwine like a braid of fire." The room pulsed with silence. "And you?" Teresa asked. José didn't blink. "I hear you. Not just your words, your thoughts, your grief, your hunger." He placed a hand gently over their heart. "You've been told you're unnatural. I'm here to tell you, you're next. The future begins with you." And then he kissed them, not politely, not out of duty, but like someone worshipping something terrible and holy. Across the city, Louisa of Orleans stood in the shadows of a high balcony, watching torchlight flicker along the palace walls. She held in her hands a sealed letter, addressed to Vienna. Within it, instructions, warnings, and leverage. She knew the church would not sit quietly, nor would France, nor the English, who saw every union as a threat. But she also knew they were too late. The wedding had been witnessed, the bed had been entered, the future had been conceived. That night the twins did not sleep. Neither did Europe. 9 months later, under a sky the color of old silver, the palace midwives stood frozen. They had been warned. They had signed oaths, sworn before relics and saints. But nothing could have prepared them for what they now witnessed. The twin infantas of Spain, now wives, now queens, were giving birth. And the room was silent, not from reverence, from fear. 2 cries rang out, seconds apart, not from 2 mouths, from 2 throats. One body had borne them, but 2 children had emerged, not twins. Mirrors, one child with Teresa's steel-eyed gaze, the other with Antonia's haunted softness. "They were conceived together," whispered one midwife, hands trembling. "But they are not the same." Louisa of Orleans stood in the corner, veiled and silent, watching. It had happened. It had worked. Elsewhere in the palace, King Ferdinand read reports in silence. The English ambassador had written of unnatural lineage. The Vatican had sent veiled inquiries. France remained quiet, too quiet. But none of it mattered now. Spain had heirs, and Europe had a future it didn't understand. Meanwhile, in a sealed chamber beneath the palace, behind a wall that hadn't been touched in decades, Dr. Chervy's journals were opened by unfamiliar hands. Not royal, not noble, just curious, a scholar or a spy, or both. They read by candlelight, flipping through drawings of anatomy that should not exist, notes written in a blend of Latin, Italian, and something else. Symbols that looked alchemical, maybe even pre-Christian. At the final page, the words stopped being science. They became prophecy. The mind can divide itself, but still be one. The body can obey two wills, but serve a single fate. The blood remembers what the world forgets. Above, in the nursery lined with silk and secrets, Teresa and Antonia cradled their children. 2 infants, each asleep in one arm. Jose Francisco sat across from them, eyes distant, hands folded as if in prayer or awe. "We've changed something," Antonia whispered. "Not just for Spain," Teresa added, "for all of them." Luisa stepped forward. For once, her voice shook. "They'll try to control you now, to study you, to break what they don't understand. Then they'll fail," Teresa said simply. "They always fail," Antonia added. The babies stirred, and in that moment, quiet, holy, terrifying, 3 generations of royal blood sat together in silence, not ruling, not commanding, becoming. Far across the continent, in a candlelit room in Vienna, the Empress Maria Theresa sat in silence as the final report from Madrid was read aloud. She listened without blinking, and when the reader finished, she only asked one question. "And they survived?" "Yes, Your Majesty." She looked out the window at the darkening sky. "Then everything changes now." In the end, it wasn't love that held Europe together, it was blood, and blood, as always, demanded its price. But this time, the price wasn't madness, or deformity, or silence. This time, it was evolution. And the world, though it didn't know it yet, had already begun to kneel.